To the Extreme Hangout at COP26, both to everyone here in Glasgow and to everybody joining us digitally. We have 4 amazing sessions for you today, running from about 10, we're a little late, until about 6 o'clock. Our incredible speakers are going to discuss with you a number of important topics, from the importance of youth leadership to combating the climate crisis via sustainable investment. Later, we have a fun and dynamic evening agenda full of social events and entertainment, like our Springwise and Reset workshop, highlighting young innovators tackling climate change. We will have audiences Q&As from our sessions for the audience here in Glasgow and for you watching at home. So please do send us in all of your climate queries to get answered from some of the world's leading experts. Now, we are joined virtually. A special message from the First Lady of Colombia, Maria Juliana Ruiz, to all you young leaders.
Greetings to everyone. I am Maria Juliana Ruiz, First Lady of Colombia, and I'm truly honored to have the opportunity to address to you some words. I'm truly glad as well that the concept of climate change is being addressed as a climate crisis, because this crisis that the world is currently facing needs sound leadership, your leadership, and we need leaders worldwide to convey the sense of urgency of this worrying reality. Colombia, the second mega diverse country in the world, is taking action. We recently submitted the Climate Action Law that will allow the country to achieve several proposed goals, such as reducing greenhouse gas emissions in more than 50% by 2030 and being a carbon neutral country by 2050. Our country is becoming a regional leader in energy transition. The Clean Mobility Law was approved in 2019, and we are drafting a circular economy policy. Our goals by August 2022 are to plant more than 180 million trees and to have 30% of our extraordinary country as a protected area. One of Colombia's key objectives is to be a deforestation-free country by 2030. So we are giving steps forward the 2030 agenda. These effects imply committed, collaborative, and coordinated work among the different stakeholders involved. Young people in Colombia plays a key role in mobilizing the message of environmental awareness and suggesting innovative and creative solutions to surpass the climate crisis. We need the youth sound leadership. All the countries throughout the world need the youth-led action on climate change. One Young World is a certainly extraordinary platform to gather these leaders, because they represent determination to lead the change, and they also have the spirit, the hope, and the greatness of our planet involved. Thank you.
Without further ado, it is my honor to introduce our first session, titled For Young People, by Young People, Fostering Effective Leadership for Global Challenges. And we welcome our lovely panelists to the stage. We have here with us Xiomara Aveiro, climate activist and founder of Barranquilla Plus 20, a community organization based out of Colombia that educates and empowers young people on issues of sustainability. We also have Jennifer Colpas, co-founder of Tierra Grata, which focuses on providing access to water, sanitation, and energy supplies to rural communities. We have Jonathan Puerta, co-founder of TaskMe, a startup aiming to help young people in their professional lives and reduce youth unemployment. And please welcome Maria Aguilar, environmental and human rights lawyer for Ambiente y sociedad, as well as one of Global Choice's Arctic Angels. Over to you.
Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to this panel session for young people, by young people, fostering effective leadership for global challenges. I'm glad to be here with other three exceptional young leaders from Colombia and a very special guest that will be joining us over the course of the panel. So what is this panel about? It's not a secret that we as young leaders are inheriting a global landscape fraught with crises, from climate change and political instability to gender-based discrimination and the rising number of refugees and displaced people. Where past generations have failed, the next must innovate to prevail. So in this panel session, we'll be talking about how young leadership is being fostered and the role that intergenerational dialogue can play in facilitating the path forward. So yeah, without any more preambles, I would like to kickstart this session by asking you, what do you believe needs to be achieved over the next 11 days here at COP26? And what are you most looking forward in this event that has been touted as one of the most important moments in the climate change crisis? And maybe I can start with you, Maria.
Okay, great. So recently we heard the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, deliver its last report. We know that the window of opportunity to limit global rising temperatures of 1.5 degrees is passing. So we need urgent action now. We know that the current NDCs, the commitments of countries, are driving us towards a 2.7 degree warming. And this is really bad news because we're going to miss the Paris Agreement, one of the Paris Agreement goals, which is limit temperature to 2 degrees and doing our best to limit it to 1.5 degrees. So I think COP26 definitely is going to be a very historical conference of the parties. The COVID-19 pandemic made climate action be, how can I say it, like way behind. So the climate agenda is pending. We have several issues to tackle. I want to mention just a few. The first one, we need climate finance, and align financial flows towards 1.5. This means raising 100 billion each year until 2025 to be delivered to developing countries to be able to mitigate and adapt to climate change. We need to address as well loss and damage, because countries that have contributed the least to the climate crisis are being impacted the most. And this includes, of course, developing countries, small island development states, so we will have the Bahamas later on, and he can perhaps bring this issue, and we can learn from his perspective. And finally, complete the rule book of the Paris Agreement, which is the Enhanced Transparency Framework, of course, Article 6, which means carbon and non-carbon markets, and finally, common time frames. So that's my take.
Perfect. What about you?
Well, we already know that this crisis mostly affect those countries that are doing the less to the climate crisis. And those countries that are doing the most to the gas emissions, they are the ones that are more protected. So what I'm expecting is really honest and empathic and real commitments from those countries that are doing the most and are already protected, and they will suffer the less. So I really am expecting that from the leader of each of those countries, and at the same time, as being part of civil society, we need to keep pressing. We need to do even more, to push even more, and to demand even more from our main leaders, because we know as individual we are already doing what it needs to do. As individual, with our small daily actions, we already do what we need to do. But we know that it's it is need to take really bigger decisions as a span level, as a scale level from the government. So I expecting really the leaders, the government, state leaders, to be more empathic and to do really honest commitments.
Xiomara.
Wow, it's like like difficult now because I think that they cover like most of the things, but I had to address maybe the necessity to deliver implementation because we already have the roadmap, like the Paris Agreement. We already have this 6 years ago, so definitely this COP needs to be about implementation, about mobilizing resources, mobilizing finance. But also, like, I think that there is a clear need to bridge the loss and damage issue because in the convention so far, the definition of loss and damage is just stating that this is related to the climate impacts, but not about real, like, the losses and damages related. So this is not covering and in this origin because the countries, as my, like this woman leader said, they're already facing the damages, we're already facing the problems. People are already migrating, people are already like being displaced from the territories. So I think that it's important, this issue, and also the transparency. We don't want more false solutions. I think that many of maybe the solutions that are being promoted in this COP or in all previous COPs are not like covering the real issue that is not only about reducing emissions, but also helping to gain more capacities to reduce vulnerability, to cope with the climate impacts in the present and in the future, and all these market-based solutions like indeed like the carbon market stuff, for example. In the implementation, they are not like guaranteeing the human rights of many communities. We have several examples in Colombia that these projects are not like guaranteeing the rights of entire indigenous communities. So I think that if we are going to promote climate action, this can be like in backwards of the rights that we have already achieved at the global level. And I think that this is an important issue that we also, as young leaders or people, citizens committed to drive change, we need to also have an eye on, because in the name of climate action, we cannot allow displacements or violations of rights.
Cool. You have bring a very interesting points, to the table beyond what is expected to the COP. Talking about climate change action specifically, I don't know, like more than 98% of the world's politicians and parliamentarians are over 30 years old. And we all know that young people are engaged in resisting climate change. But how can those excluded from this political power can make a difference? And maybe we can start backwards.
Oh, that's like the boat, Yeah, okay, Jonathan. No, I think that we need to go to these political spheres, but in general, I think that every one of us need to identify what kind of leadership is having. Mm-hmm. Like, you can run for something, or you just can act in your community at your local level. I think it depends on how you feel like you are going to contribute and how you're using your talent, your time in order to do something. But what I think is that we don't accept excuses because the climate crisis, as it involves everything, the economy, the policy, the culture, the social, everything. I think that everyone can contribute to do their part. And yeah, of course, there are a lot of constraints for political spheres. We are missing these leadership voices. We are missing a lot of the women voices too, indeed, even in this complex situation that you described. For women, it's worse, even worse, to get elected. So yeah, those barriers are still being present, but if they are not met, we are not going to have climate justice in an effective way, because climate justice is also gender justice. We know that gender inequality is one of the structural causes of climate change too. And if we are not securing that girls, women are being taken into account, recognized, and also help them to go through all the spheres they want to achieve, climate action is not going to be that much effective or that much, the things that we all dream of.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, well, I just want to point it out, the the role that the community leaders, the community-based leaders are having, because they have been doing a lot, like they are protecting their own resources, like their own environment, and many times like it's like an invisible work, because we don't know where it is happening, but it's already happening. And also, like as for example in Latin American countries and in the Caribbean, it's dangerous even to be an environmental leader. So I guess we need to do like two things. The first one is to protect our leaders that are already doing. Maybe they are not part of the parliaments or like really, I mean, not part of the government, but they are doing actions that somebody needs to do, and they're already doing it. Maybe they don't want to be as great leaders on the public sectors, but they are doing actions that are also important. So we need to protect them, because sometimes it's really dangerous what they are doing. And second, we can build this bridge from the small actions that they are doing to make it broader and to expand it like in national level, for example. Because like we are kind of ants, like little ants around, like over the place, doing really good things, but we maybe like these leaders are not finding the bridge to go to like a bigger actions, for example. So yeah, in Colombia, for example, we have a lot of really good environmental activists that are doing a lot to take care of their environment, but let's find this way to protect them and to bridge them to another stage too.
Yes, totally, I agree with both previous positions, and just to build up on that, I think the first step is to recognize that youth have been like revitalizing the climate movement, and many, the raising of ambition is thanks to youth movements across the world, and that's very important. We have to keep supporting them, and us supporting us, because I'm young still, and amplifying the voices of those at the front lines, as my colleague mentioned. And one thing that is crucial, I think, is to know our rights and then demand our rights. And access rights play a crucial role here. We have access to information, participation, and environmental justice. And in Latin America and the Caribbean, we have a very relevant instrument that is very unique and pioneer regarding environmental democracy, and is the Escazú Agreement, which also has a specific disposition on the protection of environmental defenders. So calling for the signature and ratification of the Escazú Agreement is one simple thing that we can ask in the Latin America and the Caribbean region, to make sure that the voices of those that are the front lines are taken into account, and that nobody is left behind. And this can be done, of course, with an intergenerational perspective, with a gender perspective, having into account the voice of indigenous people, local communities, and those most vulnerable.
Specifically in this context of, like intergenerational dialogue and intergenerational action, what do you guys think is important of this? What do you think is important of the young people and climate activists participating in those spaces, talking with politicians, and what do you think both parties can gain from this, young people and older generations?
I can start perhaps, yeah. So I think we most think about the role of a dialogue, an intergenerational dialogue, because it's a matter of responsibility. Those generations before us perhaps failed to act on time, and some other people from older generations have walked the path already in climate activism and can guide us and help us to amplify our voices. And then we must think as well of the responsibility of us today to protect, the future of the generations yet to come. So we must have in mind this, and there are several, tools that we can use to like a dialogue, like participate in intergenerational organizations. The NGO I work for was founded by a woman that was one of the first environmental lawyers in Colombia, and then she passed the voice to us. I'm as well part of Arctic Angels. So we have women from across ages, from different backgrounds, trying to raise awareness about the ice crisis. And so it's very important to mind that, and to recognize that the climate crisis is a child rights crisis that involves as well the generations to come. So what we do today is not only cutting emissions, but as well, having a livable planet for the years to come.
Yep. Well, I think that like the dialogue that it needs to be, it's again like very honest and empathic, because as you said, like they already have been doing a lot of things, but now like okay, it's our turn to do something. But then most of the decisions have to be taken for them, maybe. So well, first, for example, as in my NGO, what we do is like we are establishing a co-creation spaces where we like hear the voice of everyone in the community, from the child to the oldest one, and like the knowledge of all of them drive the way that we are like implementing environmental solutions in the community. So this is like a small way of doing things to co-creation spaces, for example, also can be like expanded to a state level, for example. And other thing is like they already are like carrying a lot of their own spaces, and they are kind of sometimes like, okay, now it's your turn to do something. So like I gave you the lead to start and to have this, to continue with this like inner fire that we as a young leader have, like this eager to take actions, because sometimes for them, for the older generations, they are like more used to not taking actions, but more from the policy side. But we are more like, we need to do something like really now, like it is urgent to do something. So this like 2 point of view we need to balance, but in like a co-creation spaces too.
Okay, that's very interesting too. I have to say also that these climate decisions cannot be taken in a different way, that we really need to ensure intergenerational equity, because this exchange between generation is what is going to ensure a sustainability. And we also have a lot of things to learn, but also other generations need to learn from the youth work. I think that we need also a common or a generational agreement, that is that we didn't come to this earth like to destroy or only think that this is active, like, you know, active incomes. Like this market-based approach is something that I think that we need to leave behind, because we need to understand that nature, ecosystems, and everything that is surrounding us is a heritage. Like, we have to commit to leave this heritage for other generations. And if we start incorporating this intergenerational equity principle, we need to start like thinking about these future generations. You know, like we cannot constrain their decisions with the decisions that we are making today. And I think that that's what also all these leaders and everyone, like each of us, need to also take into account, take it, embrace it, and defend the earth, because this is like our only planet. And also we don't have to be that selfish to let all problems to other generations. We are the first generation indeed that the young people that were born between the 90s, because in the 90s the climate change became a problem, a real issue. So I think that we are maybe in those born in those years. So we are like part of this first generation that is the climate generation. We inherited this problem. Now we're fixing or contributing to do something, and I think that we have the responsibility to not pass this problem to other generations. So we need to do it differently.
Amazing insights. And Jennifer, you talk about like the work with the communities, and because leadership is not just found at this international level or even a national level. Leadership can be found at the very community-based level. And maybe I can start with you, like this question, and is how can young people, normal young people back in their countries, can engage with the community around them and achieve real change?
Well, like first is that in many of the like communities, they have a lot of problems. So they can take one, like really like embrace this one problem that they really want to overcome. The second is like to try to team, like to maybe with their friends, with the same young people in their community, and to start doing something. When you are part of the community, it's easier to understand what is happening. Like then the solutions will come from the bottom to the top. It will be like a totally different approach that comes from the community to a really like a bigger level. So first, like they need to take actions because the problems are affecting them like already. and start doing. For example, as I was saying, we in our social intervention process, we established something that we call the water guardians. For example, when we start eco toilets, so it is mainly included, mainly integrated, but women, like rural women, young rural women, that take care of the resources, mainly of the water. We train them on how to use it, but we are not empowering them. Like they are already empowered. Like you don't need to come from the top and say, okay, like now this is the way that you need to do. They already know. We just understand better their dynamics and then start like with the way that we know how to do it and their leadership. Then we start like taking actions. But from that actions that we lead them to do, they are already doing a lot of things. Like they already understand that they need to take care of their environment, their water resources, because they are facing already water crisis in those communities. So for those young leaders, yeah, like team up and take action, I guess.
Xiomara, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that, oh my God, this conversation indeed about climate needs to be downscale. Because it's very easy to get lost between the economy, like between the scientific basis, the policy basis, and what is important that this is a global issue, so we need to, like engage more people with easy words, maybe like, downscale this conversation into our narratives, our discourses, our slants, our realities, our communities, like. Many people, I think that when they think about climate change, they, I don't know, maybe the Arctic is like in their minds still. Yeah. But it's like we all are already seeing the damages, the losses, and the climate impacts in our realities, in our territories. So we need to just engage our people in this conversation and in this path. But like relating the climate change problem into our realities, into our discourses, narrative. Because this way, I think that we are going to, like close that bridge between the science and the policy and also between the culture. Climate change is going to be tackled if we are also understanding that this needs a cultural shift. That we cannot consume the same things that we are already used, that the cities need to be planned in a different way, that we need to also implement approaches that are going to be different from these market ones, for example, that are full of, how to say it, like, and also like they're not really that transparent. So the lasting shift is going to be a cultural shift. Mm-hmm. So with the young people, I think that we can have an important role in, taking this climate change from all this high-level stuff into our towns, our schools, our cities, our places.
Yeah.
Cool. Maria.
And my final take is just that we must decolonize the climate movement, and what we think, like, climate crisis is not going to be solved in a conference room. There are already frontline defenders that are doing their job and the part. So we must, as Xiomara said, just look at them and amplify their voices and see what they're doing. Because we know that most of solutions already exist. These are in nature. And we know that local communities, indigenous people, are the ones protecting the last part of, nature. So that's my first take. Just let's decolonize climate action. Let's also take the conversation more broader and inclusively. And when it comes to what can young people from these communities do, I would say again, political activity, like being political active, is so crucial, because at the end of the day, there are local governments taking decisions, shaping their territories, their land, and their livelihoods, right? And this comes from different levels, of course, from the local, but the national as well, to the regional and international. So, for example, I think we have to bridge these different levels and start from the very bottom, like a bottom-up approach to the climate crisis.
Cool, amazing. Xiomara, you slightly touched like a very specific point I would like to bring up again, and it's like this relationship with science, technology, and innovation. So, what do you think is the importance of these topics for the climate change actions, and how can these three topics specifically can go beyond, like can go beyond only artifacts and tech to address climate action. Yeah, you start because I know
I'm
you
going
are.
to start because I was thinking about it. There is a lot of thought given to climate technologies, and when we think about climate technologies, we think about super modern technology that is going to solve and capture carbon. But no, like, let's also decolonize what is a technology. Technologies are just tools and knowledge that is being used, and we have indigenous traditional knowledge, we have local communities traditional knowledge that are so important to tackle the climate crisis. And just to mention a few, there are communities already that know how to cultivate certain crops to make them more resilient. There are also other communities that have better forestal practices, and these are climate technologies. When we talk about nature-based solutions, these are climate technologies. So I think we have to broader scope of what we consider a climate technology, and we must realize that there are not like man-made technologies that can solve the climate crisis at the pace that we need. The better technology is in nature, the better technology is to, again, support the communities in the front lines and cut down our emissions. That's what we need to do, like right now.
Yeah.
Because 10 years ago was the best moment, but we're so late, so right now.
I was going to say that indeed. Maria,
You can build
like,
You can they will have the practical.
yeah, I think that also like the best technology is indeed oceans and forests.
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
do you need like something else besides protecting and conserving these, so you can like reduce emissions, adapt to climate change, protect biodiversity, and you have all. So this is like, people relates technology with, very expensive stuff, a lot of economy, sophisticated, blah, blah, blah. But like forests and oceans are the best technologies to do mitigation and adaptation to climate change.
And you can add as well the Arctic and Antarctic, the albedo effect, and the Arctic, and I want to drop this very interesting data. The Arctic is warming up 3 times faster than the rest of the world. And this is cataclysmic, I don't know if that's a word, but yeah, it's terrible because if the Arctic melts, then we have sea level rise, and then the albedo effect is lost, and then tipping point, and then the climate crisis just accelerates. So what we need to do right now is literally protect what is left of nature. So the Arctic, the Amazon rainforest, all these very, crucial ecosystems for the climate stability.
Yeah, and I would like to just take the conversation from ground basis, as you said. So as I'm working in these front lines in rural, really remote communities in Colombia, so while the states are talking about how to reduce, let's say how to do like transition energy, rural communities doesn't have access to energy. So what we are doing is like providing them not just like the traditional electricity way, but access to solar energy. So we are like leapfrogging the access. So there is again like a very not expensive solution that is already in the market, and how you can not just help the planet but also the people that is already there. The second, for example, is like in the like high level, they are talking about like how to do this new, like, I don't know, sanitation access. We have this water crisis. So on ground basis, there is people that doesn't have access to sanitation. So how to help the planet and the people at the same time? For example, we are delivering access to eco toilets that doesn't use water. So what a better way to like save water that we don't use water for the toilet. So again, in these indigenous communities where they're just like one side from the river and they take care of the river, how to deliver a solution that is helping the planet and also them, like dignifying them through a really interesting environmental solution. And also like together with these water guardians that we implement. So it's not the solution itself, it's a solution that we co-create with them, again, like people that is already facing the crisis. Because, for example, like a really practical example, indigenous communities in the north of Colombia that are just like next to the river, we can think maybe that, of course, they have pure water, but this river is already being contaminated. So how to, like, they have been like a lot of years like taking polluting water from that river. So how to like clean the river, but at the same time like take care of the people that is already like being sick because of the river. So we have to deliver solutions more on the ground basis that need to help the people, like the most vulnerable one, that we, of course, like we will have, I don't know how many millions, maybe you know, like how many millions of displaced people again from the climate crisis. But this is already happening. A really like small displacement is happening in one community that when it's like when it's not the rain season, they have to move, like they have to walk more to take water. So like this is like on practical day basis for us, like not having water is what maybe we can buy like a water bottle. But for them, it's like I need to walk more, or I need to maybe wait, I don't know how many days to take water. Or like I don't have access to electricity while others are thinking about like transition. How can I say that for somebody that doesn't have like access to electricity? So as you said, like we need to connect like this conversation with what is happening on this community that have been really left behind. So all this science and the innovation have to be like for them. Like we have this bigger responsibility to like stop lefting behind, because they have been like years in Colombia, at least 15 years of war and now climate change. So they are like, okay, stop. We need to help them. We need to support them.
Yeah. These consequences of climate change that you talk about, displaced people, these interesting facts about the Arctic, in this context, like developing countries like Colombia and small developing islands like the Bahamas are like the most affected to this, even though they are responsible for a small part of the global emissions. In that sense, do you think like the responsibility of the climate change action should be of those of the greater polluters, or it is a universal approach?
Yes.
Better.
We have to take into consideration the climate justice approach, and this is a principle of the Paris Agreement, common but differentiated responsibilities, because not everybody contributed the same to the problem. The global north has eaten the part of the cake already, and actually I think they're in debt to us, the global south, and it jeopardizes even our possibilities to tackle other urgencies, such as reducing poverty, gender equality, like so many issues that we already have to face, and now we have to face climate change and the climate crisis. So I think we must recognize that the climate struggle and the climate crisis must have a responsibility approach, recognizing who has been the historical emitters, who have been not. And this is the recognition that we need to, enhance loss and damage, create finance, and what I mentioned at the beginning. This must be at the core of the COP26 decisions and at the core of climate action.
Yeah, exactly. Totally agree. Like, what I can add is like, first I don't know why the question like what else we can do like as individual. Like it's not anymore as individual or as developing country. Is it like okay, it's your turn to do something? Like it's more your responsibility than my responsibility. So I guess like we need to be aware of that and be more like pushing and demand them like this G20 countries to really take the decisions, and not just the decisions, but they really commit to take action, and like because they already protect, like even they are the most that are doing the most emissions and everything, they already protect. If they are keeping the same, they won't happen anything. Maybe like it would take more years for developing like global north countries to happen something. But for us in the global, we are like in the global south, we are already facing it. So I guess as global south countries, we need to like keep pushing even more and take the action that we are already doing. But that with our small actions, we won't solve the problem. So it's like their turn to do.
Of course, who contributed to this crisis the most needs to pay it, right? Like, and this is like how the market works, no? Like, who polluted pays. But I don't know why this is not happening in the COP26. Like, where's the money? Why the money has been so late? And it's not like even, we don't even have like exactly how much and when it's going to be released. But also like complementing what they say, I think that even the Colombia, other global south countries didn't contribute that much to this problem. I think that this doesn't have to be an excuse to not mobilize climate finance. Because we also have some public funds, private funds, money, of course, that can and needs to be focused into the climate path. Like Colombia, for example, is not investing not even like the 1% of the total budget of the country for climate finance. So I think that even we are like a developing country, like we have also other money, and it's important to get that money into the climate path, not like use excuses or delay action. So this is also a call for our countries to invest more in climate finance, because if we invest now, like it's going to be less the payments, like the losses and damages that we need to pay like in the future. And also what I think is that nature didn't cause the climate crisis, and even we are not emitting that much of greenhouse gases emission, we have been destroying nature, deforesting, and all this. And I think that when I hear about nature-based solutions, I think that the responsibility now to cope with the climate crisis is going for nature. And it's like, for me, it's weird because nature didn't cause this. So it's like, we cannot like just think that nature is gonna fix it all. We all need to mobilize all funding, all resources, all talents. We all need to, do multi-sectoral, multi-institutional, and all efforts are valid to cope the climate crisis.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And let's make a stop here, because we have a very special guest joining us, Mr. Basil McIntosh, Minister of State for the Environment of the Bahamas. Welcome.
Again the question.
Yeah, it's such an honor to have you here. And just like a quick recap, we will be discussing about joint leadership in the climate action, what is the importance of intergenerational dialogue, among any other things, in this climate action scene. And the question we just discussed about is that developing countries like Colombia and small developing islands like the Bahamas, even though they are not the greater contributors to the climate change or to the great pollution of the world, they are the most affected to that. And we were discussing about who needs to be responsible for this. Is the responsibility of the great polluters, or is it better a universal approach to address climate action? And maybe you can share your thoughts with us about that.
It's nice to be here with you. I think it's a combination of things.
Yeah.
The major contributors, as well as it's a global phenomenon, I would think. However, in the Bahamas, we are not a contributing factor to the climate change as such. We are touristic, and so we are not one of the polluters. So that's, in a nutshell, that's where we are. We are on the receiving end of pollution, but not a contributing factor to it.
Okay.
Can I mention something?
Yeah, please.
So I think it's important to recall the All Fight for 1.5 that happened a few years ago. It was a movement by the small developing countries and small island states. So that's why we have 1.5 in the Paris Agreement, because it was a whole lobby and fight of nations and islands like in the Caribbean or in the Pacific as well. So I think that must be highlighted. We have the 1.5 thanks to strong leadership by these nations.
Minister, your country have called for big radical changes, including multi-sectoral reforms, to tackle the climate change. And this will require a level of international cooperation as yet unseen. What action has the Bahamas taken in the light of this climate crisis, and what do you think can the wider international community learn from that intervention?
Well, again, the Bahamas is one of those low-lying countries, of course. Mm-hmm. And like I said previously, we are not a contributor to any of the pollutants that is going on today. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to watch the global phenomenon, and we being a very small country, we can see that there is a change in the Bahamas. And so the only thing we can do is continue to depend on some of the major polluters to give us the protection and the resources that we need. As you know, we are in the hurricane zone, and so maybe the hurricanes are more, not that they're more frequent, but they're more strong. Every year we do have a hurricane. And so we believe that global warming may have something to do with that, because we've seen the trend over the years. And so the only thing we can do is try to come up with strategies to protect our coastal areas, especially with water being so low. And so again, we have to rely on the major polluters to assist us in some way, because again, being on the receiving end of the problem, we need fundings and what have you to come up with strategies to protect our coastal area, especially being so low.
Okay. And related to that and connecting with our discussion previously, in the COP26 and in previous conference and meetings, more governments and companies have made bold pledges on climate. How can we ensure that these actors are held accountable to act on this kind of problems?
Well, I guess we have to continue to agitate, get behind them more and more to remind them that we're not going to let them get away with it. So by agitating, hopefully they would hear our plea and react to it. But we just can't sit idly by. We must agitate. We must remind them that they are the ones that, especially in the Caribbean, that put us in the dilemma that we're in. So agitation is key.
Any thoughts on that?
Yes, I think it's important to highlight the role of civil society and observers in climate negotiations, because we, as you mentioned, we push for transparency, we push for accountability, we push for more ambitious outcomes within the negotiations. And I think I'm going to take the opportunity to mention that in these negotiations, observers are being not allowed so easily, so there are many restrictions to observers to take part in the negotiations. And I think that's a setback from, having more ambitious outcomes. So I want to take the opportunity to call on the presidency of the COP26 to allow observers to be in the room. We, at the end of the day, are the ones pushing for accountability and making sure that these pledges are not empty promise pledges.
Yeah, well, I was just pointed out what Xiomara was saying, like we need to ground these conversations to the ones that are already facing the problem, and they even sometimes they don't understand what is happening. Like they just say, okay, now I need to walk more because the water is not here. I don't know why. Like some years ago it wasn't happening, but they don't know like where to go and ask like for help to support them, like to continue having access to water. They don't know why their harvest start like overflowing when it's raining. They don't know where to ask and where to like demand and push for help, for example. So we need to like for them to aware them more about what is happening, what is really happening, where can they like push and demand for solutions, for really urgent solutions, because they are being even more vulnerable than they already have been for this climate crisis. And yeah, we have to like give them the tools for them to ask for help, like ask for solutions, and also like push for solutions, funding, and like really urgent actions for them.
Yeah, I think that transparency is key. Like we need to have it clear, like money invested, and also how many emissions have been reduced for that money or vulnerability reduced. Like this needs to be like stay very clear, and you know, like this is important. Transparency is important. Transparency is of course the climate Paris Agreement, but it's like, you know, this kind of discussion that hasn't been like going that fast. So I think that this enhanced framework for transparency needs to be clear for everyone. We need this common language in order to have like trust and confidence that we all are making our part, and that the money, the resources, the time invested are going to mitigate and adaptate communities, ecosystems, people from climate change. And also equity. I think that we need to also like question, is this solution like taking into account future generations? Is this solution taking into account gender inequalities existing? Like, are these solutions that we are being promoting somehow like in these global stages like really tackling the structural causes, you know, of this planetary crisis? Like one important role that we have is like to ask, to question, and maybe this can be like accommodate like for negotiators or other stakeholders, but this is what we need to do. If we were not like bothering in the Paris COP, in COP21, the equity, the intergenerational equity principle was going to be removed from the text, and when we all, children, young, women, civil society saw that this principle was removed from the text of the agreement, we started immediately advocating, mobilizing, protesting, you know, like doing things, of course, in a non-violent way, but, you know, concretely demanding that this is important and central for climate action, and it came back. So I think that this is what we need to do. We need to continue this fight in all ways. And definitely, this is going to be worth it for future generations and for nature, that somehow we are being the voice, or we need to be the voice for this.
Amazing, amazing. So, Minister, young people are the driving force of the climate change movement, you know, agitation. What is your key piece of advice of those watching in their countries who want to make an active difference?
Repeat the question, please.
So young people are the active force of climate change. Right. What is your key piece of advice of those watching back in their countries here that want to make an active difference in this climate change movement?
Well, again, like I said, we have to continuously to remind the major donors to, you know, that we, as a small country, small Caribbean country, there must be solutions. And I know that the solutions that we may have today would be something completely different from what the solutions were yesterday, because we could see what's happening within our eyes. So again, we need to look around, see what's happening around us, and give some thoughts and solutions. But again, we have to agitate to the major donors and make them to realize that we're not going to allow them to pollute our countries and our universe without paying daily for it. Because again, there are some countries that are on the receiving end of this, and we cannot continue to do that. We just don't have the resources to come up with solutions or even to fix the problem, because, you know, we had nothing to do with it. We on the receiving end of it, and so those who are responsible should really pay. And so as younger folks, we have to start thinking out the box and come up with solutions that that may help resolve a problem. And again, those problems can be anywhere from coastal to preserving the forest and what have you. And so they are the things we have to start thinking about, especially the coastal areas, because it is definitely, there is a global phenomenon that is causing most of the, again, the islands in the Caribbean and also the Bahamas, which is a very low-lying area. And we can see the difference in tidal reactions and so forth based on previous years. And so it's just a matter of strategizing, thinking, how can we resolve it? But I'm going to go back again to the major donors. They have to come up with the funding so we can do research and resolve the problem one way or the other. But they must pay for it.
Okay, same question for you guys, like the last key piece of advice for those who want to make a difference on climate change action.
So we know that we already warm up 1.1 degrees. 2.7 will be fatal for island developing states and developing nations. So my piece of advice is just being vocal. You know, say it louder for the people in the back. We need to stay into 1.5 and fight for 1.5. So, you know, make your governments accountable. Hold your governments accountable. I think that's what you say in English. Sorry.
Well, I would advise, like, let's take our own responsibility as individuals. Let's keep what we need to do to be done. But let's keep, again, pushing our governments to take action, not just commit, but to take really honest and empathic commitments. And let's try to look at the ones that are really left behind. Let's try to develop urgent solutions for them. Really, like, we already have all the science or the innovation. Let's try to, like, from our jobs that every one of us has, and like start talking about what is happening on ground basis to try not to even make it more poor and more vulnerable.
If you are an artist, like, do climate art, you know, through your art, like, mobilize. If you are in the media space, like, communicate about climate change, look for the stories that, you know, are already there that maybe we haven't heard yet. If you are a politician, do climate policy and laws. If you are, I don't know, like, economists, also mobilize climate finance. It's like everyone can do their part. Don't forget that we are citizens, you know, like, besides all the other stuff that we are involved, we are citizens. And we have also these rights and also the power somehow, like, to start making daily changes, smart decisions, protect our planet, do our part, contribute, you know, like, in every space, in every area. Like, you don't have to do, like, big stuff at the international level. Just if you're mobilizing your family, your household, your school, your city, this is important. This is contributing to this climate crisis. We need everyone to do something. Like, there are no excuses. You can do it. You have the means. You have, like, whenever you are, you can mobilize climate action. That's the good thing, indeed, for this. Even we have this problem, we also have, like, some role to play on it.
Perfect. Thank you. And if anyone in the audience has any questions for any of the panelists or for the panel in general, like, this is the time, I believe, to ask questions.
Or comments, or
Any comments?
Yeah.
So we got some questions from the young leaders watching, hundreds around the world, and one in the community coming in. So we've got an ambassador from Thailand who wants to know in particular, do you feel optimistic heading into COP26? And what do you think we should be paying attention? What do you think we should be paying attention to most?
Minister, what's your thoughts about that?
Are you optimistic?
Well, you know, my thought is always, while each one of us have a responsibility to protect and preserve our environment, it still boils down to financing. And those who have the finance, those who created the problem, should be the one to bail us out of it. We should be compensated in some way for or to assist with the cleanup of some of the mess that they have made. Yes, individually, yes, we must do it, but you can only do so much being an individual. Collectively, yes, and in that collectiveness, there must be resources to bring about some change. And again, I'm going to hold those responsible for polluting the global environment to come forward and be responsible, accept responsible for what they're doing.
Any thoughts on that for you?
I'm not that optimistic, like super optimistic, but also not that pessimist too. I mean, I'm optimistic to see like all this, you know, like you hearing about this, like, you know, giving your time to join this conversation, the one you were ambassadors that has been like working, implementing solutions at the local level. That gives me hope, you know, that we are putting our part, that we are taking active roles in this problem. But what is happening in this COP, I don't know. I think that I have high hopes that we need implementation. If we are not having like real commitment on implementation, I think that we are wasting another chance for driving climate action. Like, we already have the Paris Agreement. It's not that perfect, but also is, you know, also have a lot of positive stuff. So I think that now is the time for implementation. The minister said the finance that's very important. Finance, loss and damage, transparency, real effective solutions, not false solutions, not maybe commitments to 2015, 2000, whatever, you know. So now, if we are not having like these commitments for implementation, like in this COP, it will be a loss of an opportunity, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I have a mix of feelings. Sometimes I feel like really hopeless because I say, okay, this old president, we like just gather it and like talk about what they are doing, but actually they are not doing exactly that. They are not being honest. They just saying like to be like, to fake that they are really doing something, but they are doing anything. They will be just words, but at the same time I really feel optimistic. Like in my daily life, I'm very optimistic and enthusiastic like person. And as I know a lot of people like in my friends and other entrepreneurs that are already doing something, like I prefer to keep this optimistic way of seeing the world, because I know that there is already a lot of things happening. And even if this another like hopeless part and the government doesn't take the action that need to be done, we as entrepreneurs and young people, we are doing it. So I prefer to keep doing my daily things and being enthusiastic than the hopeless, but the hopeless like sometimes comes.
I think I'm optimistic because I feel like, you know, every degree matters. So whatever we can do will be important. But as well, a bit disappointed already. And I mentioned before, like, having observers out of negotiations and having closed negotiations is not a good sign that this might, you know, let us to very ambitious outcomes. But I hope the COP delivers, you know.
Okay. Any more questions?
Maybe just one final one for the community. We've got Ahmed in Egypt who's asked that it says COP26 is going to be held in my home next year. And what goals do you hope the global governments, your own government, the Baham government will have achieved by then? By next year?
Can you repeat?
Yes, I can.
So with COP26 being held in my country, in my home next year, what goals do you hope the Bahamas and other governments, your own governments, will have achieved by then?
COP27 next year, yeah.
27.
Yeah.
Egypt.
Yeah.
Egypt.
I hope that, like COP27, we have a solution to some of the problems that we're now facing in the Bahamas. Again, being a low-lying country, I would hope and I would think that some of the areas, and like I said, mostly the coastal areas, is something that we would have to confront with, and actually now. And I hope by the next meeting we will have some strong solution for that, for the Bahamas.
I hope that we, at that time, are already like monitoring what is already being taken in place too. That's my real hope for this, that Colombia also can have a clear route for this NDC. Our national determined contribution is like somehow like a good number, but we don't have like clear roadmap to implement it. So I also hope that for this time we are already monitoring and seeing if this is already effective, if we are okay with this, if this is already like being equitative and transparent, and also gender like gender just.
Great. Yeah, well, my hope is also like building on that to see like a clear plan for the Caribbean region in Colombia, for example, that Bahamas will be one of the most affected one. And also I will really want to see more community-based leaders raising more their voice and showing what they are doing and try to connect that with the solutions and the decisions that the government will take. Like we need to connect those points. Because sometimes the decision of the government goes in one way and could happen with the climate one, but we cannot let this to happen. And then like we need to take more these community-based leaders to raise their voice and to share more what they are doing, because they are doing really good, and we need to learn a lot from them.
Yeah, I hope that finance is delivered. I hope that there is a mechanism on loss and damage that is fully operational. And I think as well, I don't know, that the common frames are determined to be 5 years and not 10 years, as some people mentioned. And I think, yeah, pretty much that's it.
Cool. And I hope to have another exciting conversation like this next year. Yeah, maybe with other thoughts and other facts about that. And thank you very much for joining and for listening to us. It's such an honor to have you here, Minister. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much, everybody. Minister, if I may, I have one further question for you. For these fabulous young people here, for the young people in your beautiful home country, the Bahamas, one that I have spent much of my life in as well, I'm delighted to say. First of all, my huge congratulations to you and your government for your recent success in the elections.
Thank you.
Your predecessors, unfortunately, allowed oil drilling to begin for the first time ever back last December. Are you able to offer these young people and the young people of the Bahamas the assurances that this is not a road that your government are going to continue to go down?
Why do you want to put me on the spot? You just said.
Forgive me, Minister. For the young people, I had to ask you.
Yes, you just said we are a new government.
You are.
Just elected to office. I cannot answer that question directly right now because we do not know. We need to evaluate and see what was done prior to us getting into office. Once we understand what was happening there, then we can make a decision as to the road we should take.
Well, we will keep our fingers crossed for you, Minister.
And
thank you so much.
I have also a question. Do you think that Bahamas is going to sign and ratify the Escazú Agreement anytime soon?
It's going to
Sign and ratify the Escazú Agreement anytime soon.
Wow.
You know, environmental democracy is very important for climate action, so I hope you do.
Well, I think that's a question the Prime Minister will have to answer direct.
Fingers crossed.
Yes.
And eyes as well. Yeah.
And Minister, I'm delighted to say we have actually a young member of the audience here from the Bahamas as well who has a question for you.
Hello, Mr. Minister. How are you today?
Okay, how are you?
I'm wonderful, thank you. I'm very pleased to hear that you mentioned some collective action, especially in terms of mobilizing the Bahamian youth.
Yes.
For those who don't know, the highest point in the Bahamas is about 206 feet, just over 62 meters above sea level.
Yeah.
So that puts us in a very precarious position when it comes to climate change.
Yes.
So my question is a very simple one. How does this government plan to engage and mobilize with young Bahamians who are on the front lines of this climate emergency at this present time?
Well, again, there are a lot of work that we have to do, again, coming into office, okay? I wouldn't be too bold to give you a direct answer right now as we speak. But I'll tell you one thing, I'm a civil engineer, okay? And so when it comes to coastal development and what have you, that is my forte along with structure. And so to answer your direct question now, again, we would have to do a lot of analysis. We'd have to do a lot of examination and what have you in order to give you a direct answer to what you want. But whatever we do, we'll always keep the young people in mind, okay? We cannot do too much without the young people getting involved. And that is the role of this administration, is to keep the young folks in mind every step of the way. And if we're not going the right way, we're depending on y'all to tell us, look, you're going in the wrong direction. So keep that in mind, okay? We will do the best that we can to make sure that the young people covered. And we are open to the young people's suggestions. We are open to listening to their voices and act on it. And so that's the best I can do direct to your question right now. Okay.
I think it would be amiss of me, Minister, as well, not to notify everybody who hasn't heard it already, but to celebrate with you in the fact that there are global solutions coming out of the Bahamas today. One of the Earthshot prizes from Prince William's fantastic initiative was won by a company from the Bahamas, Coral Vita.
Yes.
So amazing, fantastic innovation, and much to celebrate in the Bahamas. So I'm delighted to have had you here today. And for all of you panelists here, you guys have been amazing. Thank you for opening for the Extreme Hangout here for the COP26.
Thank you.